11th meeting of the planning board. And Paul, can you do your thing?
Magic words.
Yep.
In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law relating to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency, the May 11th, 2021 public meeting of the Falmouth Planning Board shall be physically closed to the public to avoid group congregation. Public access to this meeting shall be provided in the following manner. Be televised via Falmouth Community Television. 2. Real-time public comment can be addressed to the planning board utilizing the Zoom virtual meeting software for remote access. Hold on a second. I had a robocaller coming in. Thank you. This application will allow users to view the meeting and send a comment or question to the chair via the chat function. Submitted text comments will be read into the record at the appropriate points of the meeting. Instructions. Instructions in the meeting link for this specific meeting should be found in the following web address: www.falmouthma.gov/planning. Please plan on 10 to 15 minutes of preparation time to log in, though it may be less if you have previously used Zoom on the device you will use to access this meeting. 3. Additionally, public comments may be sent in advance of the meeting to planning@falmouthma.gov at least 5 hours prior to the beginning of the meeting. And audio or video files may also be submitted via email. Submitted email comments and documents will be made part of the meeting record, to be read into the record, summarized, or displayed during the meeting at the discretion of the chair. 4. Applicants, their representatives, and individuals enforcement matters before the planning board may appear remotely and are not required to be physically present. Applicants, their representatives, and individuals enforcement matters before the planning board may contact the planning department to arrange an alternative meeting of real-time participation if unable to use a Zoom virtual meeting software. Documentary exhibits and/or visual presentations submitted in advance of the meeting to planning@falmouthma.gov, so they may be displayed for remote access.
Okay, I'm still getting somebody who has.
Somebody's got something.
Somebody's got a radio, a television, or something in the background going on.
Oh, it went away.
Pam again. Okay. Paul, the minutes, please.
I recommend approval of the minutes of April 27th, 2021 as corrected.
There a second?
Second.
Okay. Jim? Okay. All in favor, show by raising your hand. Okay, it's all of us present, which are all 7 of us. We move on to approval not required. And you all have these in your packets. The applicant for the first one is Richard and Bonnie Rosello. Plan of land to create 2 lots out of 1 located on Sippowisset Road, map number 37, 06 002 000C. Approval not required. Does anybody have you all had a chance to look at it, and does anybody have any questions on this application? Okay. Then I need a motion to accept it without regard to buildability, et cetera.
So move.
Is there a second? Bob. Okay. Pam and Bob. Please show your approval. Vote yes by raising your hand. Okay, all 7 of us. Thank you. The second applicant for an approval not required is Village Common Properties LLC. Plan of land to divide Lot 2A into 2 lots located at 20 Village Common Drive. And again, have you all had a chance to look at what was in the packet, and do you have any questions in regard to this? Paul?
On the upper part of the plan, in the middle, it says plan purpose. And the lot 2A-2 is not considered a building lot and is created for convenience, for conveyance purposes. So I suggest lot 2A-2 should be noted as such on the plan itself.
Oh, on the plan. Tom?
Yes, if I may, Madam Chair, I actually had that same conversation via email with Matt Costa the other day. Matt was fine with that. They are going to include that note on the plan. And if the board wishes to include that in their motion to endorse the plan without regard to buildability, to incorporate the physical note within the lot 2A2 parcel, we'll note it in the record and we'll include it in the plan before endorsement.
Does this suit the board? Okay, so may I have a motion to that effect, please? Nobody wants to make a motion, huh? Bob?
Move to approve the A&R for plan of land dated 4/7/21, Village Common Properties LLC, without regard to buildability, but the note regarding the plan purpose.
The conveyance of,
Lot 2A2
to be placed on the plan.
to be placed on the plan. Yes.
Okay, may I have a second, please?
Second.
Pam, okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, all 7 of us are in favor of that. Thank you. Now, we move on to public discussion, mixed residential and commercial overlay district. And this is, we had said at our last meeting that we wanted to invite comments from the public in regard to this. And Tom, do you see any public here who might want to give comments?
No, ma'am, we have 2 people who are attendees in the audience. I see nothing on the chat with anyone asking to make any comment on our document.
Okay. And John, did you want to say anything?
I think we're good unless we have some questions.
Okay, I still have the comments that I made the last time that are still open on it. And Charlotte in particular thought one of them, if I can find it, should be described a little better. Let's see. in regard to setbacks and a buffer area, that I didn't want anything to be argued that, well, we get this by right and we can do away with the buffer area. So that needs to be clarified in here, okay? And I also think that there needs to be something put in there about, I don't want to give false expectations that the minimal lot size is 10,000 square feet and there can be 4 units put on it. But and that would be if it's on sewer. So I don't want to give false expectations to somebody. I know, John, you had said last time that, well, the health department will take care of that. I think we need to be as clear as possible in this so that it's by right. So those are still my comments. Does anybody else have any further comments? Because I'd like to get this moving along. Charlotte?
I do have a comment. I'm a little disappointed in the lack of public interest. Or it
Yeah,
could be that they are unaware of it, or because this will now be our only public hearing on that. Is that correct?
No, ma'am.
no. No, we were trying to get public input on it so that we could make changes before it ever goes to the warrant, and then we have public hearing on it. Jim?
Oh, okay.
I couldn't find it on our website. Is it posted there?
Yes, it is. Let me quickly share my screen for you. So here on our homepage, Falmouth Planning Board, right underneath the calendar, top of the list, proposed mixed use. And we click on it and
When did
Shazam.
that come up?
Pardon?
When did that get put there?
Likely after let me get rid of this share screen.
Because I looked for it yesterday. I didn't see it.
It wasn't there yesterday when I think it was Charlotte and I had talked about it today.
Okay, because I was looking for it and didn't find it. It's right on top. I couldn't have been that blind.
No, you weren't. Not that blind. So after our Zoom meeting today with the staff, and after I talked to Charlotte, we made it. I talked to Melinda. She apologized for not getting it up earlier, but it was up as of today, late this afternoon.
Well, I feel
Okay.
better. I thought I was missing something.
Charlotte?
Could Tom please review for us what the process going forward will be?
Of course.
Given the lack of comment tonight?
Absolutely. So as we've done before we have a hearing, we're just trying to get sort of a feel for tweaks to the bylaw. We will have, as we do with any zoning bylaw, hearings in advance of town meeting. And after during those hearings, then we can open them and keep them open for a number of meetings. But at that appointed time that we want to sort of schedule our hearings for town meeting, because we're projecting to bring this to the November town meeting, recodification to the November town meeting, and form-based code to the November town meeting. So obviously that's a lot of things to try to talk about in one night. So I'd venture to say that we are going to spend the summer talking about some of those things. Not to jump ahead of the update on Davis Straits and Union Studios, but in talk with them today, we're targeting July date for drafts that would come out of Union Studios. So I would venture to say that in July, we would be looking at starting the hearings for any of the articles that are coming to town meeting for November. Because these are complex, they're not simple little things. So we want to have plenty of time to talk about them. So we will start in July. We will have our business conducted and closed up well before the warrant closes. So we're in that fortunate situation where we have a recommendation for town meeting as printed, because we'll be modifying the bylaw based on what we hear during the hearings. That's the purpose of the hearings. So July being that start date for hearings for town meeting articles.
Jim?
What's the end date for public comment for town meeting? When does it close?
I have not seen the schedule for November, but it's fairly typical. And I want to say mid-September-ish. I'll have to go back and
Yeah.
take.
It's usually
But-
mid to end of September, I think.
I'll
Jim.
say 9:15 for now.
But
Okay.
to make it as simple as possible, there's a way to make anything as simple as possible. Let's say from the 4th of July to Labor Day.
Okay.
Beautiful. That's a nice, that works.
Charlotte?
I'd just like to make a comment here, so that we can be sort of thinking in that direction. 3 things, all really of some import to the town. The mixed residential and commercial bylaw change that affects Business 1 and Business 2 districts.
And BR,
Yeah, and recodification, which is a very, it might strike us as straightforward, but I think it could have a lot of questions and concerns associated with it. And we have yet to actually see the language of a bylaw that we will be proposing for form-based zoning. So to think that all 3 are going to go through public hearing and arrive at town meeting in November is more ambitious than we usually are.
Mhm.
And it's possible that the form-based zoning, because it seems to be lagging behind the others in development, might not make it to November.
There's always the possibility, I think, that if we're not ready, that any one of these may not make it to November. Because we try to not bring something to town meeting unless we feel really confident that it's finished.
Right.
And so any one of these may not make it to the November town meeting. We want to have it polished and where we feel confident in it.
And what I would suggest is that when we get to having the hearings, that we essentially dedicate a night to each one individually, not to say we're only going to do them on one night. When we did the 40R in Kingston, we broke it up into 6 components: housing, traffic, and all these sort of things, just to try to piece together all this complexity and make it, compartmentalize it for folks. So I would venture to say we'd open each one. We may decide to meet, our 3rd week schedule for those sort of things, and dedicate one of those 3rd meeting weeks for that sort of stuff. But it is ambitious, but we've got a lot of things that are hanging out there, a lot of things that have been lagging, and I'm just trying to move the ball here and get things done because there's just a lot of goals that we have for bringing our zoning into the 21st century, and we've been on this path for a while, and I remain optimistic until the board says, "Dude, no." So that's what I'm hoping to see.
Well, my fervent wish is that we may be able to meet in person come July. Don't know if it can happen, but my fervent wish is that we could do that.
I can check with the high school and see if we can have hearings on the football field.
Oh, you're such an optimist, Tom. Oh, dear.
And I'll say this, and I don't usually say nice things about COVID and things like that, but one of the criticisms I understand that are sort of weighed in Falmouth is the people who don't necessarily live here or go away during the summer because it's hot, or whatever the case may be. Having hearings in this format makes it possible for people wherever they're at to participate in the meetings. So you don't have that concern about, well, I'm not here, this traffic's too bad, I'm not going to go to a meeting. We may find that there's some benefit to this awful meeting format we've been working on for all these months, to having these hearings and moving the ball along. But we'll see. I am by no means optimistic.
Yeah, I'm not saying there aren't benefits. I like being able to see all of you instead of having to crane my neck around the table to see who wants to say something. This is more conversational, and I do enjoy that. But I think for the public, it may be more challenging. Charlotte?
I think it's true that the potential is there for greater participation, but I think the data will show that there's actually been less. And look at the lack of participation tonight on our first public hearing on the mixed residential and commercial bylaw, which really would be quite a change impacting several parts of town. And yet no one has tuned in to have an opinion on it. When we meet in person and we meet in a large enough place, even if it's just in the town hall meeting room. We can see there are seats there. People are used to coming there. They know how to express their opinion and they prepare for it. So I think it's really reduced participation, even though the potential might have been greater. And we should recognize that.
Yep. And John?
I just wanted to say that at some point, we should reach out to the Cape Cod Commission to see if the areas affected by this proposed bylaw would be deemed growth incentive areas, so that the applicant wouldn't have to go through the Cape Cod Commission if it was a large enough development. I'm not sure at what point we should do that, but I think it's going to be very important at some point.
Tom, could you follow through on that?
I can. Unfortunately, and I don't know that he's left or gone anywhere, but I know that the chief regulatory officer for the Cape Cod Commission is now positions being advertised. So the fellow who I've been working with on this thing on a pretty regular basis, John Ivan, may or may not still be there.
I'm just pretty certain that that's what happened on Nantucket, a similar bylaw, and they were able to get the zone so that it isn't affected by the Cape Cod Commission.
Yeah.
Okay, and Tom, you had your hand up, and then I'll come back to Charlotte.
Well, and Charlotte and I were actually having a conversation sort of similar to this earlier today in the CPC conference room, identifying those areas that don't require the rigorous review or referral to the Cape Cod Commission. If it's in those areas that are within both the community activity centers that the commission is mapped and the suburban development areas, which they have not mapped, but simply described. So if we focus our fire on those areas, and what we've talked about is a map that goes with this overlay district to identify another overlay on our very busy overlay map for this sort of thing. So if we look to those areas where we're not going to put somebody in the process of going through the commission, the Cape Cod Commission, if we can put them in those community activity centers, which are largely around downtown and in Woods Hole, and in these suburban development areas, which are various places they described but not mapped. We're working on mapping those things and consulting with the Cape Cod Commission on, based on your description in the regional policy plan, this is what a suburban development area looks like. These are the areas we've identified from your description. Can we get a confirmation from you that these are in fact what you meant when you describe suburban development areas? Because everybody asks the same question. If you've got these 7 typologies, can you map them for us? And they said, no, we won't map the suburban development areas, but I think it's the primary spot for those sort of things. There's also industrial development areas, and whether but those are typically, in the zoning may or may not be for that type of development, but we could certainly look at putting them into those industrial development areas as well. But the focus is, let's try to make development and likely redevelopment of some of these things easier for the applicants, because I don't think this bylaw is going to generate a 400 unit development. I would think it's likely going to develop 40 10 unit developments maybe. And that's the sort of thing that we need, is a diversity in housing stock in different locations, but in areas that are appropriate and not sort of out in the hinterlands.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned industrial areas, Tom. We want to keep this sort of development out of the small industrial properties that we have, small number. So
once again, that's a concept that's been introduced by the Cape Cod Commission Regional Policy Plan. Industrial development areas. It's not necessarily industrial zone district. It's an area they described in there in the text.
Yeah, as Charlotte.
I just learned about the activity areas where the Cape Cod Commission has already said that they do not need to be consulted for any developments in those places, even where the developments proposed to be greater than 10,000 square feet. And that's an important thing. One of the underlying goals of the mixed residential and commercial development bylaw is to incentivize developers to come and build in those areas. And one of the ways to do that is to make them aware that they won't have to pay the fees to the Cape Cod Commission, because nor spend the time, year and a half, 2 years, going through that process. So it's an important point. And although I wasn't studying the maps that are now posted in the CPC meeting room, any of us can go and take a look at them. The red outlined areas are the activity areas, and it appeared to more or less correspond with business 1 and 2 districts, our bylaw districts. And this, just so they don't get confused, the bylaw, the mixed residential and commercial bylaw states that only B1 and B2, and not all of those, would be involved in being allowed by right to have mixed residential and commercial. As
Jim,
much-
and then,
Don't leave out business redevelopment.
I'm sorry, and business redevelopment, which affects one area of Main Street in downtown Falmouth.
Tom,
Very
And if I-
limited
if I can just
defined
correct,
area.
and if I can correct a sort of a misstatement I made to Charlotte earlier, while these areas as they exist right now, there may be a referral to the commission. It is not to the extent that you would be doing if you're outside of one of those development areas. What we'd love to get to with this is very similar to the agreement we have with the commission on the tech park. And in the tech park, if somebody builds something, it doesn't go to the commission. So we need to work towards that, as John pointed out, identifying with the commission to develop that memorandum of understanding like we have with the tech park, to say, this is our policy, this is where we want to go, and get that sign off from the commission. That's, I think, very important to John's point.
John,
Just a question. What is considered the CPC meeting room?
That little conference room you and I sit in, or anybody who comes to visit me.
Okay. Because when we have our CPC meetings, when we had them, it was at the school. That's why I was a little.
okay.
So
Oh,
I-
Is it the old water department? Is that what?
No. It's
No,
it's the small conference room on the second floor.
Okay, second floor conference room.
Yeah,
Somebody
Okay.
named it before I got here. I just it's the limit right now is 2 people under the COVID rules. So don't everybody come tonight. But happy to host you when you want to come by and take a look at the maps. Just, give me a heads up. Let's make time, and we'll show you what we got going on up there.
Okay, thank you.
okay, I'd like to move on now to planning board discussion. We have to revote the town meeting article recommendations for the June 28, 2021 special town meeting. And Tom was going to prepare that, because the only thing I have is what I cut out of the newspaper as far as the article numbers go. So Tom, have at it, please.
If I may. So this is sort of a belt and suspenders from my perspective on the advice of counsel. While our recommendations, while the hearing for zoning articles is good for 6 months, the concern that perhaps council and the town clerk had, well, those were recommendations that the board made for the annual town meeting. And while our hearing is good for 6 months, they thought it best through belt and suspenders to revote those recommendations. So it's a bit of an odd process, but so was our vote that we did like a couple weeks ago to I cannot come back to the language to acknowledge that we were going to bring up all these articles at the annual town meeting or the special town meeting in June. So with that, we have been asked to revote our recommendations. Now, if we were doing this fresh out of the box, we'd be having a hearing, we'd be posting it, and we would have a hearing for public comment and things like that, but we're not doing that at the advice of council. We're just voting those recommendations. So I have those exact same slides that we had for April that I'm prepared to put up on the screen, just to walk through them for the viewing audience and for town meeting members who will get a copy of these slides and get a link to this meeting, so they can come to the planning board meeting and say, here's what I got going on for the hearings. But at this point, we are simply revoting the planning board's recommendations. So if you'll bear with me for a second, I'm going to share my screen. Give me just a second. All right, a little legwork in the background there. Laura Moynihan has actually showed up at the meeting a bit late and wanted to make some comments, so I was just asking Michaela to chat with Laura. So give me a hint to share the screen. And every time I try to do this, I think I've got it figured out for showing the PowerPoint. So are you seeing right now a full-on slide of June 28th or one with my margins in the sideline there?
Margins in the sideline.
Yeah, I had a feeling that was going to happen. So give me just a second to do that one more time. How's that?
Okay,
Full on screen. All right, so
Yep.
special town meeting planning board articles for June 28th. Article 3 is to amend our site plan bylaw, review 240-192 applicability. So this was our change to the zoning bylaw to site plan review for applicability that essentially added redevelopment, lowered the square footage from 1,000 square foot to 500 square feet, and included changes about parking areas, parking spaces, increase in pavement that we had previously discussed. It went on to talk about those administrative approvals that the board might allow without having to go back through a hearing. If that proposed alteration doesn't violate any provisions of the bylaw, doesn't result in an expansion of the footprint, doesn't change the height of roof lines, and doesn't change any substantial change in lot, that those might be minor amendments to a site plan that the planner could approve with the board's vote. So in waiving those requirements, the board may waive any of those requirements that are in the zoning bylaw right now that's required for a site plan as well. So that is essentially what Article 3 was. And why are we doing that? Because the threshold in the current bylaw requires the planning board's review for any new development or expansion in use, which would add 1,000 square feet or more of gross floor area. And in the current bylaw, site plan can be redeveloped without the planning board's review for proposed new buildings that are not more than 1,000 square feet. And this issue came to light, as we talked about before, when 435 Palmer Ave, the existing gas station, was demolished and rebuilt, and there was no planning board review whatsoever regarding driveways, drainages, or design, because the new gas station or market didn't increase by 1,000 square feet, and it wasn't considered a new development or an expansion under the bylaw. So that was the gist of applicability for site plan number 3, to both expand the scope of the board's ability to review site plan, but also give some discretion so minor changes could be made without having to go to the full extent. So that is Article 3. So
Okay.
we want to take on a vote on Article 3 and consistent as we go along here.
I do believe we should, and because I can't see all of you, I wish you to please say your name.
I have a question, Pat.
Jim? Yes, Jim?
Did we say anything about the changing of the roof area? Or are we just still doing it on 500 square feet of floor area?
We did.
No, but that wasn't mentioned tonight.
My apologies. Give me 1 second to bring that back up. I know
It's
that's
okay, as long as it's in there. I just remember it was there.
Nothing has changed in the bylaw. Required a change in layout, location, parking spaces, increase in parking, alteration of driveways. Yes, 500 square feet or more of gross floor area or roof area.
Okay.
Roof area being that amendment to the bylaw.
Okay, that's what I didn't hear. Thank you.
Okay, well, now I can see all of you. So all of you in favor of this recommendation to the warrant, raise your hand, please. Okay, that's all of us. Thank you.
Just as a side note, the other day driving past that gas station, there were cars in the road.
Yep.
Waiting to get into Dunkin' Donuts.
Yep,
That is not good.
No,
No.
not at that intersection.
We have that.
and
Other
this
areas
isn't
in town
summer
too.
even. Yep, this isn't even summer.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah, Starbucks being the other.
Starbucks is the bad one. They're in the road already.
Yep, they are.
Alrighty, if I may, I'm gonna go back to share my
Please.
screen.
Yep,
We'll see how I do this time, if I learned anything last time. So Article 4, amend the zoning bylaws, site plan review 24198, lapse of decision. This simply adds another year, 1 year to the site plan review decision, but prior to a lapse. It is consistent with what we do for special permits. So that site plan would be, would not lapse for 2 years, but rather 3 years. And as I said before in the explanation, the amendment would extend the time by 1 year to act on an approved site plan, making it the same as the time frame to act on an approved special permit as allowed in both the zoning bylaw and in Massachusetts general law.
and our recommendation is that the town vote the Article 4 as printed.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please signify by saying your name and I. Oh, there we
Fox,
go,
aye.
great. Raise your hand, please, if you're in favor. Thank you. That's all 7 of us, thank you. Okay, so Article 5, please, Tom.
All right. Alrighty, Article 5 was amending our zoning map to see if the town will vote to amend the official zoning map. There are no properties being rezoned. We are simply making the maps consistent. So we have current versions of the zoning map that you see on the screen here. And these 2 boxes are on the one that the town clerk sells are the things that are coming out of the bylaw. And we've taken some of the zoning map as the map and incorporated the overlay districts as well. So this is the part of the property that part of the map that's coming out. And the finished product will look like this. We'll have a proposed zoning map with a bit more clarity to it, with the districts in there, and on the second sheet, the zoning overlay districts.
Okay, and our recommendation is that the town vote Article 20 as printed. The revised zoning map is included in the warrant booklet. So all in favor? Okay, 7 out of 7, thank you.
All right.
And the next one is Article 6. Yes, Jim.
Not that it's really that important, but I have found a mistake, a conflict of information. If you look at 78 Main Street, it says that it is in a RC zone, residential C on GIS. But if you click on the map, it's clearly in a general residential zone. And I think that can add some confusion when that's going on, especially because that property is being redeveloped. And people need to know what the right zoning is.
Jim, can you follow up with an email just to send me that note about what those particular ones are? That was. What's the address?
78, it is, what is it? Bank of Martha's Vineyard building. It was, now it's next door. It's owned by Alan Cordetz. And it says, when you click on GIS, it says residential C, but when you click on the zoning map, it's general residential. And that shouldn't be a conflict, that they should be the same.
Well, the map is the guiding principle here, not what the GIS says. So if we have to fix something in GIS.
Well, it's been sold and it's listed as residential C, and I think it's going to show up being a problem.
Okay.
Because it's general residential.
So that is the property right next to the former Bank of America now.
That's it.
The white one with the little building in the front, or?
That's it. Yep. The front of the lot's general residential, and the very back of the lot is residential C. Same as the Bank of America, old Bank of America building.
Okay.
So it's a split zone lot.
Right, but it doesn't mention the right zone.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Okay, so we're on Article 6 now.
So petition articles, The original petition article being such. And then, oh, I think I'm clicking the wrong screen there. So this is the original petition, Article 6. The planning board recommended Article 6 as amended. This is the solar changes to the solar overlay district, where the abutting permanently conserved open space would have a reduced setback to 35 feet. In section 24254D, the planning board may allow additional deforestation up to 4 or more acres or up to 10% of the lot, whichever is less. And in that case, there would be required mitigation such as the permanent conservation of open space or reforestation or offsite of at least twice the area to such excess. So if they take out 2 acres of trees on the site, they'd have to mitigate for 4 acres elsewhere. And then lastly, the provision that regarding 254D, except as allowed land clearing in excess of 2 contiguous acres in connection with any single installation is prohibited. So that is what the board had voted their recommendation on the amended, the petitioned article in previously.
Mhm. And this was an amendment to the original that had been printed.
Correct.
So, okay, so we had voted to support this and it was amended by the petitioner.
Correct.
Bob?
Just in that first paragraph where it says in a residence or agricultural or agriculture, should it be residential and agricultural?
I think
Or when I just read it this time, it just seemed funny to me.
that's what we call them in the zoning, the agriculture district and the residence district.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just, for some reason, it just looked odd.
Yeah, it
when I
does.
read it this time. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so may I have a show of hands in favor of our recommendation? Okay, 7 out of 7. Thank you. We move on to Article 7.
Or maybe 6.
We just did 6.
Okay, you're the chair. You knew that. Like, hang on. Give me just a second, please. I'll get my screen back.
That's only because I have my prior warrant booklet and I wrote in it.
All right, so. All right, I guess I should have called that Article 7 there. So what you're seeing is called Article 6 is actually Article 7. So my apologies for that. Let me just make sure that I'm still on the same page.
Yeah.
So Article 7 was to amend the map. So.
Yeah, right. The official zoning map.
Right there where it says Article 6, that is supposed to be Article 7. So I will fix that slide here in just a moment. So under Article 6, we would be incorporating those lots described as 10-03-001163, 10-04-007-035, 17-01-028 and 039, and 17-01-028A15, as well as 17-01-028-134, 10-03-001A-161A, 10-03-001-162, and 10-03-001-160 as the revised overlay district. So here is the map that Bob Shea produced for the Springtown meeting in April. This still has that typo or the original document for that. But these are those parcels that I had described that are both sides of Boxbury Hill Road, south of Theater Street. Here they are shown as the area photography using the GIS for the entire area, and then the northern and the southern portions.
Okay. And our recommendation is that the town vote Article 7 is printed. And then a map will be included. Does anybody have any questions on that? Charlotte?
I have a question on the numbering. What I've got, I'm confused and I wonder if other town meeting members are. I'm working from this warrant book from April that we're going to be meeting on again in June. And they are not numbered 1 through 7 there. They are numbered differently. And
Right,
I wonder if we should just say the numbers as they would appear at town meeting.
Well, they are.
We are.
The current warrant for June 22nd is using those numbers, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
I didn't know they had a different warrant book.
This is,
the,
This is
the
what I
June warrant book hasn't been sent out yet. This is the old one, Charlotte.
Oh, okay, so we wouldn't have it yet.
yeah, so
No.
these article numbers, this is the warrant that I took off of the website.
Uh-huh. Okay, so for people who are trying to work from the old warrant book, it's 19 through
22.
22, yeah,
Yeah, I would recommend people not work from the old book.
just in case.
I'm with you.
They don't have it, the new one yet.
I only did it because I needed to know what I was talking about tonight.
Yeah.
So,
So if I can just share my screen for one more quick second.
yes,
Thank you. You've been very gracious to me tonight. Not that you're not ever less than gracious. All righty. So I hope that we see petitioned Article 7 on the screen right now.
yes.
All right, so I've changed those article numbers. So Article 6 was changing the zoning. Article 7 is changing the map. Article 7 to change the map. Article 7, those are our maps for town meeting, northern version and southern version. So it is in fact Article 7, not Article 6. My apologies for the typo on the slide.
And of course, it says that this petitioned article would make changes to the existing large-scale ground-mounted solar bylaw that would apply to all future solar developments. And that is these particular parcels. It's nothing other than the particular parcels, is my understanding. That it's rezoning.
That is my
Okay.
understanding.
Okay. So all in favor of sending this recommendation to town meeting, to the warrant. Okay, thank you all. And that's that for that. Next on our agenda is the update on the assistant town planner position.
All right, if I may, Madam Chair, do you want to toggle back to multifamily bylaw and hear from Ms. Moynihan, who's in the
Sure,
attending?
absolutely.
All righty, if Justin, if you could elevate Laura Moynihan, please. All right, Laura Moynihan is on the screen.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm sorry I'm late. You're super efficient tonight. So yeah, thanks for letting me jump in. So I missed the discussion and you may have talked about this a little bit. So I'll just jump right in with some comments if that's okay. Okay.
Absolutely.
So the first thing that struck me from the bylaw was that the Cape Cod Commission has a DRI threshold of mixed use development, 20,000 square feet of residential and non-residential. So if you have a development like that's being contemplated under this bylaw and your building or buildings are more than 20,000 square feet, it's going to be an automatic DRI. And that typically has been, and some of you may know this, but that's been a real disincentive for Main Street redevelopment. Because in my experience, developers do want to put apartments in. You know, they'll say we'd love to put in, 5 or 6 apartments on the second or floor or whatever. But the first thing that we in the development, field do is check your square footage, because if you're over 20,000 square feet, you're triggering the DRI. So all of a sudden the apartments get dropped. That's typically what happens. And now you have a commercial development only that doesn't trigger the DRI. So if I'm saying things that you've already talked about, then
No, we hadn't.
okay.
Thank you.
So so in an effort to kind of make this attractive, which I think is the goal. And by the way, I think, the board and the staff should be commended for the effort on this, because it's great. We need this kind of stuff. The commission has something called a growth incentive zone designation. So Yarmouth has one, Barnstable has one in downtown Hyannis, where the commission can work with the planning board and the town of Falmouth to designate some of these areas that you're looking.
That we had talked about, Laura,
Okay.
the growth incentive zones.
Right. So
And-
it's really just kind of a permit process where, in line with this bylaw, you go to the commission, you ask them to approve these uses in your designated growth incentive zones. It's not like the tech park, which is different, but it's basically a permit for certain areas in the town. And then within those areas, whatever the commission says in the permit is exempt from DRI review,
Okay.
then you're good to go. So
I think Jim has a comment in relationship
I
to
have
what
in
you
my
said.
notes, just before Laura came in, that we did say that no Cape Cod Commission on this zone. We talked about that.
We wanted to make it so that there would be no Cape Cod Commission. And
But
then
we didn't
that's
say
why
it in
we-
writing to,
That's
okay,
why we
because I
talked
put that in
about
my
the
notes that
DRI.
we did, okay.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
we agreed
Okay,
with
Laura.
Laura, thank you.
yeah, it's just that, there could be some developments that fit within the bylaw that don't trip the 20,000 square foot threshold. But if you have 10 apartments of 1,200 square feet or 1,000 square feet, and you have another 5 or 10,000 square feet of commercial space, you're going to trip that threshold. So
It has to go away.
Yeah, that mixed use development. So anyway, just a general thing. That somehow maybe there's a way to try and get a special exemption from the commission to make this attractive to developers, because I can see people coming in and saying, well, we have this new bylaw, I want to redevelop this property, I want to build a 25,000 square foot building, I want to take advantage of the affordable housing by right development, and right away it's going to be, well, you're an automatic DRI, and people are going to be like, oh,
Mhm.
and not that, the commission is great to work with. It's just, as you know, an expensive and time consuming process. So it's a disincentive.
Didn't we
also
address this
asked
for
Laura-
Davis Straits as well, that Davis Straits, if we go forward, it's also not the Cape Cod Commission? I thought that was a fundamental part of the whole thing.
We've also asked Tom to forward this to the commission for their comments. So
So that's just one general thing that jumped out. The other thing was the coastal pond overlay district and the denitrifying septic system requirement. So, if this bylaw is intended to encourage by right what we call 40A affordable housing development, meaning under the bylaw, rather than 40B housing development, where the town has less control on conditioning and whatnot, then including that provision that denitrifying septic systems are required in a coastal pond overlay district is more restrictive than a 40B development. I mean, right now there are no requirements in our zoning bylaw for denitrifying septic systems if you're in a coastal pond overlay. There's not even a waiver requirement for it. So the difficulty is that requirement in itself is a disincentive to a developer applying under this bylaw, because the developer might say, well, why don't I just go 40B? It might take me 6 or 9 months longer, but I can get the same development under the 40B and I don't have to comply with that. So one thought is that maybe there's a discretionary waiver provision that's added to that, similar to what you see in the coastal pond overlay bylaw now, where, if the applicant is able to establish that they're not discharging to a high quality or highly sensitive area, or that they're able to show through nitrogen loading studies or groundwater studies that their groundwater flow isn't into that coastal pond, et cetera, but some sort of ability for the planning board to waive that provision. Just a general comment.
Jim, you have a comment or question?
No, we have that when we do our subdivision laws with the 5 lots. We waive that sometimes. There's a clause if we're doing subdivisions of more than 5 lots that they have to be denitrification, but it's something we can waive. So I'm agreeing with Laura, this is what we should do.
And maybe we should add it here.
Right.
Yeah, some kind of discretionary waiver requirement so that a potential applicant who's looking at this bylaw, depending on where the site is, can say, my engineer can establish that I'm either not in a high quality area or that my groundwater flow is in the opposite direction, or some basis for establishing a waiver of that provision. Because otherwise, I think it's going to be a huge disincentive for people to be applying under this bylaw to get this development approved when they could go 40B and not have to deal with that regulation. I mean, and we're all concerned about the coastal ponds, but in the real world of developers, it's about costs, and it's about the cost of those systems, the maintenance of those systems. So that's what people are going to be looking at when they're looking at maybe going under this bylaw.
Okay, John?
Yes, well, we looked at this pretty hard, Laura, and if we're going to have any waivers, I think it would have to be really strict interpretation. And I don't think it's going to be that much of a disincentive like you think, because this bylaw, if it gets approved, not like a 40B, it has no profit limitations, and it has the density by right. And we think it's going to work even if it has to have denitrification. And so, but I agree with you, if the flow doesn't go toward the pond, if there's some situation like that, then maybe a waiver could be issued. But we want to be kind of strict with this, because we are going to, if the town approves this, it's going to have a lot more density than currently is the possibility. So.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, but I think that there are profit limitations even with this. I mean, you're requiring a certain percentage of the units to be affordable units. They're going to be deed restricted. So even on the for sale units, there are going to be some restrictions on what the developer can make. But I don't know. I just, in looking at bylaws, I just find that if there is opportunity to give the regulatory board some discretionary waiver authority, you should put it in the bylaw, because it's within your discretion. You don't have to grant it, but it's there. And there may be circumstances that come along where you really want to grant it, but if it's not in the bylaw, you can't. So anyway.
John, you had another comment?
No, I agree with a lot of what Laura's saying, but I'm also trying to think of a situation where a 40B would be approved with a mixed use. I know they did one on Main Street, but I can't think of any others that have been approved or even thought of. Are you allowed to do a mixed use with a 40B?
Yes, sir. 40 Scranton is the latest one that's being proposed.
Yeah, and 704 Main Street is a mixed use. And as long as the commercial space is less than 10,000 square feet, you're still exempt from Cape Cod Commission review, regardless of the size of your building. So
both those examples are nonprofits.
That's true.
So anyway, I think this is a really good bylaw, no matter how it gets looked at, but I think some waivers would be fair enough to look at. But again, I would want it to be fairly strict because of our concerns with our water here on Cape Cod.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to Laura, she probably wasn't part of the conversation on other times, but this ownership component you see in this this bylaw, it was only put in to comply with state law. We were told you cannot regulate, make them all rental units. you can't say that, it's not legal. So we came up this way of saying, well, if you make them 50%, if you make them ownership, you lose the SHI component of it. And you have to have 50% of them be affordable so that they would never do it. It's actually a disincentive not to force them to be rental units. It's a backdoor way of dealing with it that you probably doesn't, it's what it is, it's a backdoor.
Right. Okay.
Okay,
That's
All right.
strange, but it's that we couldn't come up with another way of doing it.
okay, let's let Laura continue now.
Okay. So other than some minor kind of form things, one of the things that I was a little confused about was the buffer area. So that's in the section E on the requirements, and then H. So you have a buffer area that you're talking about, where you have a minimum of 20 feet, and then you have a setback requirement. And to me, that was a little confusing. I thought maybe it should just be a setback requirement, because you're saying that in the buffer area, there's got to be planting, fencing, walls, but then you're saying in H that the minimum setbacks will be 10 feet from the side yard, 10 feet from the rear yard. So
Yep.
I just found that a little confusing of what was intended there. And maybe if you're intending for a 20-foot buffer area, that it just be a setback of 20 feet, period. I don't know, just a thought.
Laura, you're underscoring exactly what I said.
Okay.
It's confusing.
Okay.
Okay,
All right. In the decision section, you talk about the criteria for approval. And one is the proposed development complies with all applicable subdivision requirements unless waived by the board. So to me, that kind of jumped out because I thought, there are many lots in downtown Falmouth that wouldn't have to comply with subdivision requirements. So I wasn't really sure what the intention was of that. If you're not creating a subdivision, do you mean subdivision regulations, or do you mean, what's the intention of that? If you're not creating a subdivision, you're just taking an existing lot in downtown Falmouth and redeveloping it.
okay.
So, and then the other thing, it wasn't clear to me if this could apply to existing buildings as well, or if it was intended to be, say, an existing commercial building where somebody came along and said, I want to add 4 apartments and apply under this bylaw. Would they be allowed to do that? Or would it have to be a whole new building at once? A whole, you know what I mean? I just wasn't sure if that was the intention, was that it could be something that had existing commercial space and somebody maybe wanted to put a second floor on it.
It's either way, Laura.
Okay. All right. So that, if you wanted to make that clear, it could maybe be put somewhere in there that it would apply to existing under mixed use development, that definition, even at the end, just to say including modifications to existing buildings.
Mhm.
So it was clear that's the case. So other than that, I don't know if this is still in draft form. I had
Oh, yeah.
a couple of little form comments that I could send to Tom. I don't need to take up any more of your time, but those were really my thoughts on the bylaw. But otherwise, I think it's great. Anytime we can get some, overlay district or incentive for more affordable housing in the downtown area, that's great. So thank you for that.
And- Well, I thank you for joining this conversation, Laura.
Yeah,
and
that's
you-
great. We
It's
appreciate it.
in draft form. That's why we're having this discussion. So please send your additional
Right.
comments to Tom.
All right,
Really
will do.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
All
you
right.
very much, Laura.
you're welcome. Good night.
Good night. Okay, so we're going back to update on assistant town planner position.
All righty, thank you, ma'am. So we have advertised and we are interviewing for assistant town planners. We had a very good applicant who was scheduled for a second interview and has withdrawn his name. And so we are looking at the existing pool. Typically how this happens is there's an apply by date, a preferred apply by date. And when the personnel department sends me things, it's typically those people who applied prior to that date. And so we're looking at some of those applicants as of today, because it was first thing I did when I got back yesterday was send an email to our applicants saying, hey, looking forward to our second interview, at which point he followed up and said, no, I guess I said they said, sorry, I'm withdrawing my name. So we're looking at the new sort of a handful of folks who came in after the deadline and reviewing those, and hopefully we'll be scheduling some additional interviews shortly. But, right now we're still trying to, identify a qualified applicant for the position and have them get through the interview process. It's been very long and very frustrating for all of us, I can assure you.
Okay, thank you. Update on zoning recodification.
Alrighty. We, as you know, town meeting was very good to us and approved our additional funding for Bob and Bob to continue some of the work and work through that 64-page matrix of comments we received from the development community, from the attorneys in the neighborhood. So with that funding available, I let Bob and Bob know actually right after the vote that the vote came in. It's not like it's like a no hitter. You don't want to talk about it until it's over. So with the adjournment of town meeting, I let them know that we've got the funding for that. We don't have, when I got back, I checked in with Bob Mitchell to say, well, what's our schedule to get back to work on this? And I have not heard back from Bob. We had our national planning conference last week. A lot of work going into that. And I would venture to say that Bob is likely out of pocket after his work for the national planning conference and his other clients, but sent him a text, followed with a call. So I haven't heard back from Bob, so I don't know exactly what the schedule is, but the good news is we're funded for completing this work. And as soon as I hear back from Bob, we will get a schedule out for when we will start slogging through that 64-page matrix. As you know, from our last attempt to do it, it is a slog. We want to make sure that we hit those comments because we ask people for comments. It's really, really, really bad form to ignore them. So we want to go through and vet those sort of things and make sure. And a lot of the comments weren't quite in the scope of phase one. They're more likely in the scope of phase two. But we'll be going through and vetting those. But I don't have a date for when we are going to start that because I have not heard back from.
Tom, I'm going to interject here because I don't know whether the board and probably definitely our listening audience does not recall what phase one and phase two. We put in a phase two because there were certain changes that we believed should be made that were more in depth rather than the kinds of things that we were looking at for the first round of changes. And so this is going to take a lot of additional work to do that.
Yeah, and as I said, we anticipate going to town meeting in November for additional funding for some of the things we discovered during the bylaw that aren't strictly recodification, that are things that just need to be fixed.
Yeah.
Because at the scope that we've got right now, we know that when we vote on the recodification, it will be sent to the Attorney General for review, and that will open our entire bylaw for the Attorney General's review. So anything that's in our existing bylaw that we didn't change to recodification that doesn't meet muster with the AG, they will note that and likely give us time to rectify those things rather than throw them out. But Bob Ritchie being a former staff member of the Attorney General's office, they've had those conversations right along as we've been going on with this thing. So we know that we're likely going to have some additional fixes we've got to make after recodification, and we'll be asking for funding for that in November. But for right now, money's in the bank. Our Bobs are very happy to know that that funding is there. And just a matter of getting back to hammer and tongs and working through that extensive matrix.
Okay. So update on Davis Straits and Union Studios.
Alrighty, I have the Davis Straits survey available as well, if you want to kind of walk through the results of the Davis Straits survey that we did.
Has everybody looked at it? Tom forwarded it. Looks like everybody has looked at it, Tom.
Yeah. So in discussing with Jeff Davis of Horsley Witten Group, who is working with Jeremy at Union Studio, we are targeting the month of July, the week of July 19th, for our first public hearing on the drafts. We are still in the midst of creating that working group that Pat had suggested at our joint meeting, and I'm sorry that has laxed a bit. But we want to have that group put together to review those comments prior to them becoming the public document. We are also looking at putting together some focus groups with the property owners. We talked a little bit with Jim about some of his, the folks that he's familiar with there. I actually got a call from one of the property owners in the development to talk about that as well, and ask them if they would be, how they'd feel about sort of being my point person. I was like, is there like an owners club that you guys go to and chat about things on the strip? And he goes, no, there's not. So we hope to have, likely in the first week of June, at the beginning of June, a smaller focus group of property owners. We had talked about previously about having the sort of the large parcels as one group, and some of the smaller parcels where there's more of a residential component, the people who are on the edges of the development, as two of those focus groups. So we are currently identifying those folks and hope to put together that first joint meeting, or first meeting with the stakeholders. We hope for the week of May 25th, but likely I don't want to, ask somebody to come to a meeting on short notice. So we want to give them as much information as possible for that stakeholders group, with Horsley Witten Union Studios as a focus group for what we're trying to do and what their concerns might be moving forward. And then hearings beginning week of July 19th for the actual hearings on the text of the Davis Straits form-based code.
Okay. Moving on, review of revised Percival Road 40B plans and update ZBA referral if needed. I'm assuming you all have had a chance to look at that. That was in our packet. And I really don't see that we need to update the ZBA referral, because our original objections are still true from what I saw. Do you all agree with that? Okay, I probably should have a show of hands. Let's see, how can I phrase this? Do you want to update the ZBA referral? Everybody who wants to, raise your hand. Everybody who does not want to, raise your hand. Okay, so, and I know John has abstained, so it's 6 and 1 abstention. 6 not to forward it, not to do any review and change to the ZBA. Are there any committee, Charlotte?
If we go back a minute
Yes.
to the Davis Straits, you've set tentative dates for the public hearing, but the board hasn't seen the proposed bylaws yet. So when would we see what we're having a hearing on?
In my conversation with Jeff today, he said basically it's going to take about a month for them to start working through what they've sort of likely already started on. That's been confirmed through the Davis Straits survey. So we would likely see something from them in June. But because of the lead time to line up, all the hired hands, if I can call the Union Studios and Horsley Witten that, we just need to have that lag time to set that time frame so everybody's on task to know that here's our deadline for getting those things done. But there will not be a cold reading of the Davis Straits form-based code on July 19th. The board, the working group will have their fingerprints all over it. prior to that deadline, that opening of that hearing.
Only the working group or the whole board?
Oh, the board. So, one of the things we talked about our last meeting with Union Studios and Horsley Witten was the scope of what that group would be doing for us. And that sort of frontline set of eyes that are looking at those sort of things. Two planning board members, and I think a member at large is what we had talked about. So the process would be that sort of vanguard, the working group, and then the full board, and then out to the public.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. We have committee reports. Any committee reports tonight? Paul? Paul, you're muted. There.
Just a quick update on the Coastal Resiliency Action Committee. The committee is looking forward to submitting a report to the Board of Select Board by mid-June. And I spent a little bit of time yesterday with the town planner going over some of the implications to the planning department. I think we need to talk a little bit about that at some point in time. But the recommendations will be made next month. One of the things that are in there is an update to the local comprehensive plan. And we've been talking about that too, but I propose we consider that maybe for 2022 rather than anytime in the near future, because we have so many other things going on. But I just want to alert everyone to the fact that there is some recommendation that local comprehensive plan address more of the coastal resiliency issues that are currently not outlined there.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Are there any announcements? Okay. Paul?
Don't forget to vote next Tuesday.
Right.
Candidates for the planning board need your help.
Okay. General correspondence, April 28th through May 11th. And Tom, you wanted to say something. Tom, you're muted.
Yes, I think earlier today, Charlotte and I had talked a bit about an editorial regarding the board's comments about Scranton Ave, in that the newspaper seemed to think the planning board had jumped the gun on making comments. When we look at the agenda for 4/27/21, the staff put together had two items regarding 40Bs. One was comments to the ZBA for Scranton Avenue and comments to the ZBA for Lewis Neck 40B. That certainly should have read comments to Scranton Avenue 40B site approval letter, because that was the nature of the request. It is fully within the board's ability, in fact, almost their requirement, to make those sort of comments. When we look at the Chapter 40B handbook for zoning boards of appeals, whose principal authors are old friend Judy Barrett. This was published for the Mass Housing Partnership, DHCD, Mass Housing and Mass Development. They talked about the stages of a 40B development and how that process goes through. That first local comment period, where we are at right now, comes when the chief executive officer, being the Board of Selectmen, receives that request for site approval application. And so the text of the bylaw says, after receiving that application, the notification letter starts the clock for a 30-day period for the city or town to make those comments, and that they would seek comments from municipal boards and departments for that use. And that was the nature of the board's discussion on the 27th. They were not specifically comments to the ZBA. That was sort of a misnomer on the agenda, but we were making comments under the site approval process that we have done prior. And I think there's been 6 or 7 of them as we've been going through this. Not all of them made it to the board because the time frame is a little tight. And we first started coming here, I wasn't bringing them to the board's attention. but the board had asked that we do bring those up, so we did. So the windows are very tight, the timeframes are very tight, but when we get that PE and it gets sent out to everybody else, we are on the clock and we are duly obligated, in my opinion, to make those comments. The draft letters typically come from the Board of Selectmen's office or the Selectmen's office, Select Board's office, but we have sent separate letters previously. After that subsidizing agency receives those comments, they have typically about 30 days to turn their report around and send something back out. And then the other tight time frame is that we've got the ZBA has 30 days to open a hearing after that plan is submitted. So the timeframes are very compressed. And while we would very much like people to talk to us, and I have said from day one that I always want you to bring to me a plan on a cocktail napkin if necessary to talk about what you're proposing to do prior to you filing an application, because plans are money. My 5th day of work in April 9th, 2018, after we voted Article 34, which changed the requirements for local accommodations that would allow the La France Hotel to take place. And I walked to the back of the room with 3 business cards and introduced myself to the local attorney, the local builder, and Mr. La France, and said, I'd love to talk to you about your project before you get it fully developed. And then 8.5 months later, without a word from anybody, they submitted the whole application, which they later withdrew and went away. So while we can't make people talk to you prior to applying for something, it is a best practice, in my opinion, and a potential time and money saver to do so. And we always encourage folks to do that. But I was told a long time ago, don't ever get into a fight with somebody who buys their ink, their printing ink by the barrel. But the planning board was fully within their right to make comments on the site approval letter. And we did, or you did, as I understand. I have not reviewed the meeting when you made those comments yet, but I have seen the letter that Michaela put together that reflects those. I've seen the email from Peter Johnson Staub, who's crafting that letter that includes those comments. And I will likely see, there was a draft letter that came that was emailed today that I haven't had a chance to look at from Peter Johnson Staub that's CC'd to the planning board as well. And the board's comments about the massing, the appearance of the building, transportation, the crossing the street, those things are all incorporated into the letter that's being drafted for, in this case, DHCD versus Mass Housing, because DHCD is the subsidizing agency. That's sort of a long-winded discussion about correspondence, but I wanted to get that out there.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And Jim?
Just quickly, I would agree with Tom. I pointed out we did Brick Hill Road. The selectmen had already voted on it by the time we were asked because we didn't do it quickly. And I suggested we have to do it faster. So I understand what the enterprise thought process is, but they're missing the picture.
Well, I think part of it was that we had not heard from the applicant too. And had we heard from the applicant, some of our comments might have been different. So
30 days is all we get.
I know. Charlotte? Charlotte, you're muted.
I visited Tom this morning about some things that were coming up tonight, and that was one of them because I was so taken aback by the Enterprise editorial saying that it was an unofficial thing, that it shouldn't have been before us. And of course, it was before us, and it was correct that it would be before us, and it's correct that we were able to make comments on it. So I just thank Tom for clarifying that.
And we thank him too. I think the rest of us do as well.
Yes.
Future agenda items, it seems like we're pretty full up. Is there anything special that somebody else wants to put on for future agenda items? Okay, our next meeting is May 25th. Same time, same place, Zoom. Okay? And it is 7:54. The meeting is adjourned. I already did, Jim.
Hey, Charlotte?